An old tired story in the good old USA. Hi again, folks. Welcome back to Caribbeanology. And today, this topic is going to be somewhat, I guess you can say, more somber, but it's to take a hard look at a common theme here in the United States when it comes to black folks and black men specifically. In this country, even though I am from the Caribbean, there are no distinctions made when certain people look at me. As they see, I am just a black man. And I am not doing this video because I want to go out here and try to say that all white people are complicit, all white people are evil, all white people are bad, that all police officers are bad, that they mean no good to the black community. I am not here to create a video stating such, but so much of it goes on that it is just disturbing. And of course, the latest case that's going on here is with this young man in Georgia who was killed, Ahmaud Arbery, who, by all accounts, from what we can see from the video, which I have not looked at, I pretty much would look at the video up to the point of him being shot. But based on what I have read on reliable sources, news feeds on Facebook, it looks like he was just gunned down in cold blood. The two individuals who did this, I don't know if it's been written as yet, but I guess it's going to come down to we feared for our lives, or a situation where he looked like someone who has been breaking in to homes in the neighborhood. The usual look like, or the usual we feared for our lives argument. And this is really, really, really disturbing. Now, me coming from the Caribbean, I know we have our issues. Black folks in Africa, they can tell you they have their issues. I could lose my life in the Caribbean. I could lose my life in Africa just as much as I can lose my life here in the United States. But there's just something different about losing your life because of the color of your skin. Something about that is just really weird. Now, what makes it more interesting, or I should say, I don't know the word to use, but what makes it even more crazy is the fact that in the United States, this is considered, or they proclaim themselves, a self-proclamation that this is the greatest nation on earth. And I've always told people, when I hear that, I don't buy it. I would look at it that the United States is the greatest nation on earth when it comes to blowing up shit, when it comes to showing off their big weaponry. Look at how many warships we have. Look at how many bombs we have. Look at how many fighter jets we have. Yeah, greatest in that sense. Maybe at some point in time, and I shouldn't even say that it ever was, to be perfectly honest with you. I guess you can say, yes, there are benefits to living in the United States. There are good things about it. There are good people who live here. But when it comes to living a life, living life, the United States lacks in a lot of key areas: healthcare, education, basic human rights, basically, basic rights, I should say, that humans should have. The United States lacks significantly, falls way down the list when it comes to industrialized countries. The United States pales in comparison to a lot of other places. So when it comes to quality of life, which is where I would consider a nation being great, the United States pales in comparison to a lot of other places. Sure, they're great, in terms of bombs, weapons. They can blow up the world a million times over. But is that what we need? What human beings need is to feel like they live in a place where there is a great quality of life. In the United States, I can't say that's true across the board. Now, for me personally, again, I am a black man. I am a man from the Caribbean living here in the United States. And I will be straight up honest with you that when I first came here to live in this country, now I've lived here for most of my life. I came here as a little boy and I went back home to the Virgin Islands for my last year of elementary school, um, all of middle school, and all of high school before I came back to the United States. So I've lived in the United States twice for a lengthy period of times, and now I'm still living here. But if I had to give you this, when I first came here, I was naive, just like a lot of other people who've come here to this country. I want to say naive. I was naive to how things really work in this place and the various things that are out there that work against you. So when I came here, I ended up eventually living in Florida, where I spent, at this point in my life, the most years of my life were spent living in Florida, South Florida, that is. And I remember when I went there, I had this naive notion that cops are great people. You know, they all meant well. Cops are the last people you think will hurt you. Um, I lived in a middle class neighborhood when I went down there. I was a young man, just 21 years old. And I was one of the lucky ones that ended up living in a middle class neighborhood. I had a fairly decent job, and there I am living in a middle class neighborhood. The first thing that I remember, my two brothers came to live with me. And I remember one of them, I went to work and they weren't working as yet. So one of them decided to just go for a stroll through the neighborhood. It was an apartment complex, but I want to say around that area was predominantly white. So they go walking through the neighborhood, or he goes walking through the neighborhood, and cops held him up, ask him what he's doing here. What is this? They put him up against a car, frisked him, try to find out what is he doing walking through the neighborhood. It happened to him twice. All right, I didn't think too much of that. I just figured cops are just doing their duty. They see someone, but I guess I have to admit that they thought he was suspicious walking through a neighborhood. A black young man walking through a neighborhood where he actually lives, and they thought it was suspicious. That should have raised a red flag, but didn't think too much of it at the time. And then the next thing that happened was I vaguely remember this, and I think it has a lot to do with the fact that, again, me being naive at the time and me just saying, that's just people just doing nonsense. The majority of people around here are not like this. But I think I do recall coming out of my apartment complex one day, and the way my apartment complex was, you had to walk up some stairs, and it was like an octagon shape. So you had my apartment over here, then there's a part, I'm sorry, my apartment over here, then there's another apartment over here, then there's another apartment over here, and there's another apartment over here. So you had four doors in this octagon shape. I remember one morning coming out of my apartment, and if I am not mistaken, I think there was some writing on my wall, spray painted. I don't recall there being any words, but I think there was a swastika, if I am not mistaken. That's incident number two. I don't remember what happened. I don't even think I reported it, but I think by the time I came home, it was gone. I don't know if someone else reported it or whatever, but it was gone. Um, didn't really set off any alarm bells in my head, but um, I think something was being told to me there. Another incident in the same community. I remember I was going for a walk through a parking lot somewhere, and these apartments were two floors. And what happened was, I lived on the second floor, but a lot of people used to open their blinds, just have them wide open on the first floor, and you could look inside and see what's going on. So I'm walking through a neighborhood, and I looked and I see this huge Confederate flag just sitting on the wall, someone's wall. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. All right, number three. Another time, I was going on a flight. Um, yeah, I was going on a flight with my brothers. I remember it was a July 4th weekend, and we were going to New York City to visit one of our other brothers. This was back in the day before 9/11, where you can literally walk onto a plane with your relatives, with your friends. You could literally go on the plane, sit, talk with them, chat with them, and when the flight is about to leave, you get up and you walk back out the plane and you go back inside the terminal. Yes, there was a time when that actually was possible. And I remember going inside the flight, and my brothers had two seats next to one another. I had a seat that was separate. So what I did was I was sitting with them in the row, with them, figuring that when the passenger would come in, who needed that seat or whose seat it was, I would get up and I would go to my seat. Well, the person came in, and I remember it was a white family. And I could remember when the lady looked down and she saw me in the seat. I remember this look of scorn on her face. And she said something to the flight attendant. And from what I understand, I think it was something along the line like she did not want to sit next to my brothers. I can't really remember what happened there, but I think I ended up getting the seat next to my brothers because she did not want to sit next to them. All right, that was incident number 4. And that's just things that tinged of or was explicit of the racism that you can deal with in this country. Now, onto the cops. Again, I had this naive notion about cops. I thought they were good people. I thought they were well vetted. I thought they were, their head was on pinned on right. So I never really thought much of that. I just saw cops and just thought these are wonderful guys. Most of them I would see that would be like pretty pleasant, and so forth. Never had any encounters with them until one particular night. I remember that actually I had another incident prior to this. This one, I did not really put it into perspective at the time because I didn't really think much of it. But I do remember in my car, I used to have a Jamaican flag and I had a Virgin Islands flag. Jamaican for my ex-wife, Virgin Islands for me. And I remember we were driving going to Belle Glade, Florida from Fort Lauderdale. And for those of you not familiar with Belle Glade, it's an area near Lake Okeechobee. And in that area, there were cane fields. So, and other, I think, other vegetables and fruits. So, what used to happen was every year they would bring up seasonal workers from places like Jamaica to help to cut the cane. Well, my ex wife had a cousin who was one of these seasonal workers. So, when he would come up, we would drive up to see him. So, with Belle Glade leaving from the Fort Lauderdale area, if you take, I forgot what the highway was. I guess it's I-75. I'm not sure. But if you take that highway into Belle Glade, you're pretty much driving through the Everglades. So there are no homes, nothing, just swampland on both sides. So you're flying going up this highway. And when you get to the town limits of Belle Glade, it's like you just hit this town. It's just there, you know? And the first thing you hit is a gas station on the right and maybe a couple of other places. At least a gas station used to be on the right hand side. So you're driving out of the Everglades. You're just driving swamp, 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 and bam, here's a town. So I remember coming in, and when we pulled into the town, started driving in, and off to my right, I saw some police officers. But I wasn't speeding or anything. Maybe about a quarter mile up the street, they pulled me over. They came up behind me and they pulled me over. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? My ex-wife at the time was pregnant. And I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, I wasn't speeding. I wasn't doing anything crazy. The next thing I know, they came up, basically told me they were nice. They were okay, But they came up and told me to step out of the car. One came on one side, shining the light in on my ex-wife. The other one on the other side, talking to me, asking me for my license and registration. And then he asked me to step out of the car and told me to go sit in his car. But my wife was in the car. My ex-wife was in the car. And I don't know what he was speaking to her about. I'm sitting in his car, looking and watching them search my whole car. They're under my car. They're checking in the muffler. They're looking up underneath. And I still have no idea why I was pulled over. I have no idea how I ended up in his car or why I had to go sit in his car. I had no clue. So I go sit down, and if you look at me, I have never been a person that you would consider to say look threatening. I mean, I could dress that way. I could pull up my hoodie. Every now and again, I do that, especially here in this cold area. I can go ahead and do stuff like this, and I have on my shades and everything. So there are times when I can look threatening, but that was not one of those days. I look like a regular family man, you know? So after they did that check through, he told me to come out of the car, and I said, "Hey, why was I pulled over?" And you could see him fumbling for an answer. He was like, well, you crossed the solid white line." I was like, "Solid white line?" I didn't remember what even happened. But after he checked everything, he let us go. Again, at that time, I did not put everything into perspective as yet. As yet. I'll tell you when I started doing this. So still, I left. Didn't really think nothing bad of cops. Thought they were just doing their job. Thought they may have thought they saw something or whatever. Didn't really think much of it. Didn't look at it like they pulled me over because they looked in that car and realized that two black people, Jamaican flag, Virgin Islands flag, they're going towards Belgrade with a bunch of other Jamaicans up there. They could be carrying something. The next incident that happened, and this was the most disturbing. One night, one of my children at the time, I had my other children after that, was sick. And their mother, who was a nurse at the time, in-house nurse, was off at work. And this was back in the days when cell phones were still a little sketchy. And she goes off to work, and she works overnight. So I am home with the children. Now, where she worked, the reception was not the greatest in the world. And I'm saying that for a reason. So anyway, one of my children was running a fever or something like that, looked and realized didn't have anything in the house for her. So what I did was I got them in the car, and we drove this was at night, like 10 o'clock at night. We drove like, maybe a quarter of a mile, an eighth of a mile to the local Walmart. We go to the Walmart. My car had tinted windows and everything, but again, I still had my Jamaican flag, Virgin Islands flag on the inside. So we go. See, this video is kind of getting okay. I'm doing probably a little too much talking, but bear with me. So we go to the Walmart, and as I go to the Walmart, I'm coming back now. As I'm coming back, I see this car comes right up behind me, and I'm like, "What the hell is wrong with this person?" So I looked in my rearview mirror, trying to find out why did they right up on top of me, in a neighborhood, small road. So I go up, and then I turn left onto my street. And as I'm turning, I look to my right to see, because a car now is coming behind me, like passing. And I wonder, like, who's this idiot? As I looked over, and I saw two white guys, and I saw them lean, and they look at me looking at them. I'm like, that's weird. So I go driving up my road about 2 blocks, and I make a right turn onto my street. When I made the right turn, I saw a car come behind me again. And this time, it put some lights on. And I'm thinking to myself, who the heck is this? So I'm in my neighborhood, short road, and all of a sudden I see these lights, red and blue, blaring in the back. So my house is probably about another 4 houses down. So I didn't stop immediately. I drove down to my house, and then I pulled up into the driveway. As I pulled up into the driveway, and I could look through my mirrors, I just see 2 guys come out with their guns drawn, looking like they were in combat. One of them crawling around on the floor, and I'm like, what the hell? So the next thing I know, they came in, guns in, like, why didn't you stop back there when we put on our lights? And I'm like, hey, I don't know, man. And what was going on during that time in South Florida, there was a rash of situations where there were people who were putting lights in their car, pretending to be police officers and pulling people over, and they were not police officers. And they were not the car that pulled me over was not a police car. It was a regular car. But I guess they were undercover police officers. But I didn't know this. So I decided to drive up into my driveway, and I'm there. The next thing is, they didn't believe the house belonged to me. And I'm like, this is my house. They're looking around like, yeah, okay, yeah, right. So one of them started shining a flashlight inside, and he looked and he saw the children in the back. And my children are seeing this, guns stuck in like this. And I'm like, what the hell? My son was in the front seat with me, actually. My firstborn was in the seat with me, and the guns are drawn inside. And I'm like, this can't be real. Guy comes up, and I guess once they saw that I was a family man, I think they called in and they found out that, I guess when they ran my information, they found out the house actually did belong to me. You know, they toned it down a bit. Guy says to me, "Hey, there's a warrant out for your arrest." I'm sitting, warrant out for my arrest? What the hell did I do? And he was like, "Well, we can't tell why." And he then tried to talk me into. He then tried to comfort me to make it sound as though there was not much that he was going to do at this juncture, or there was nothing much that he could do. So he tried to comfort me by telling me, "All right, look, this is the routine, man. I've got to arrest you, but you're just gonna go to the local police station, and once they realize what's going on, I'm sure it's no big deal because nothing came up." Now he's telling me he can't tell me why they're pulling me over, why there's a warrant out for my arrest. And he says, "This is what's going to happen," and whatever. At this time now, all my neighbors are flicking on lights and peeping and like trying to see what's going on out there. So I'm embarrassed right now that cops are pulling me over. Their lights are still going off, and I'm in my neighborhood. So while I'm there, um, he calls a regular police car. They come by. He puts handcuffs on me. I'm like, "Hey, what's going to happen to my children?" This is the first time in my life I'm having handcuffs put on me. And I'm like, "What's going to happen to my children?" And he is like, "Listen, you don't have anyone you can call?" And I'm like, "Hey, the mother's at work. I can't reach her because the reception is poor where she's at. I would have to call the house phone." But somehow, and because it was late and she was taking care of elderly patients, I don't normally call the house number. I don't know what the house number was. So after that, I was like, the only person I have is my brother. And my brother lived maybe like about a good 5 miles away from me. It started raining. And it's like, "Hey, well, look, if you don't call someone to get them right now, we're gonna have to call child services to take them." And I'm like, I didn't know anything about child services, but all I just know is that you're gonna take my children and put them in some house somewhere. So I panicked and I was like, Okay, my neighbors. I barely knew my neighbors, and I was like, okay, they can watch them. So my neighbors who were next door, one was from El Salvador, one was from Mexico. Their daughter used to play around with my kids and everything, but I didn't really know them all that well. So it turned out that I had to send my children to stay with these neighbors that I barely knew. So the next thing you know, I have the handcuffs put on me, and then I am put inside a police vehicle. And I'm tall, and the thing is up against my knees, and I'm just like with the handcuffs behind me, and I'm driving in the car like this. Police officer was in front driving, had no personality whatsoever. I didn't know what to expect. I've never been in this position before. So I reached to the local police station, and when I got there, they put me in a cell with somebody else. And I'm in there, still have no idea what's going on. After about 3 hours, they finally called me out. They brought me out. The guy came out, fingerprinted me. He looked. The guy was from Puerto Rico. He looks, and he was like, "Man, this is what they have you in here for?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Yeah, it looks like it's something to do with a ticket that you got some years back." And I think I remember him saying what the price was like $68 or something like that. And I'm like, "What? A ticket?" And I said, "Yeah, I did get a ticket some years back, but I went and took care of it. So I don't know what this is really all about." Okay, as if this was not humiliating enough, now they're taking us to the city, Fort Lauderdale. Now they're taking us to the city prison. They come and put me in an orange jumpsuit, shackled my legs, shackled my hands, and then led me and a few others into some van with no air conditioner in the back. So I'm sitting here like a common criminal in the back of a van, driving, going to the jail. Then when we got to the jail, they made us take off whatever we had on. And because I guess we were not considered dangerous, they put us in an open area, like a cafeteria area. We're free, we weren't in any cells or anything like that, but we're sitting there and we're all talking to one another, and we all basically were giving the same stories. Guys were just like, "Hey, I was just driving down the street, no big deal. Next thing I get pulled over, next thing you know, I'm here." Nobody committed any crimes. When I say crimes, no one shot anybody. Nobody was there because they murdered anybody, they ran over anybody, they stabbed anybody. It was things like they pulled me over because my tags were this, and there was a warrant out for my arrest because I didn't pay child support, or um, there were a lot of somewhat minor things there, at least for the people I spoke to. Anyway, the following day, I was bailed out. I spent 8 hours there. I was bailed out, went straight to the courthouse to find out what was going on. Turns out that around that time, and here's where I was naive, I had gotten a ticket and it was for speeding. Nothing crazy. I think it was like I was driving like 45 in a 40 or 45 in a 35-mile-per-hour zone. And when I had gotten the ticket, the officer wrote on the ticket, from what I remember, he wrote on the ticket, and I guess he gave me a court date. I was naive. I thought the court date was given to you if you wanted to dispute the ticket. Here's a date. If you want to dispute it, here's a date and whatever. This was before Florida went to an automated system, so everything was still kind of like written out by hand and so forth. So I remember going to pay the fine, and I remember the court date was a date that was corresponding with the time that I was going to fly to Jamaica. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to pay the fine. I'm not going to go to court. I'm not going to dispute anything. I'll just pay the fine. If I'm not mistaken, I remember going and paying the fine, but I did not go to court. Did not know that the law was if there's a court date given to you, you have to appear in court. I had no idea, none. So apparently, because I did not show up in court, there was a warrant put out for my arrest. I'm trying to remember if we were living someplace else, so I don't know if whatever correspondence they had was going somewhere else, and that's the address they were sending it to, and I was not getting it if they were sending me any correspondence. So I had no idea. So each year, I think 2, 3 years go by, no notice, nothing. I go to renew my tags. Nobody told me anything. So I didn't know any better. So when they pulled me over and they did all of this, it started to put a bad taste in my mouth about police officers. The way they came up against me, the way they acted. And this is when I started to have this notion in my mind that, hey, I don't think these cops are all, whatever. Then I happened to notice a few months later in my same neighborhood, saw those same two white cops pulling over people. And it looks like what they were doing, they were targeting people because my neighborhood was full with a lot of Jamaicans and everything. And back in those days, like I mentioned in one of my other videos, Jamaicans had a certain reputation, or, I shouldn't say had a certain reputation. It's a perception from other people about the reputation placed on them, that all Jamaicans were just drug dealers. They were all part of some posse, and this is what they were doing. So I guess when they saw the Jamaican flag in my car, it's like, that's a Jamaican. Let's go after him. Let's find out what he's up to. And this was just a time when I just felt I was really disappointed. And that's when I started waking up to the realities, and all those things that happened before started to come into perspective. That, hey, you know what happened? I am a black man. I have a target on my back. I have a bullseye on my back. And I've got to watch myself in this place. Now, I'm trying to remember if there was some other incidents that took place during that time, but I do remember from that point on, I just had a complete, total distrust when it came to police officers. I started to see them differently. Like when I would drive past and I would see them pull somebody over, or would see them acting a certain way with certain people, I started to realize that these people some of them had this power trip going on. And the reason why I say a power trip, because it's not always been white officers. Sometimes I've seen black officers just doing the most against people of their own color, or just anyone. The power gets to their head. The absolute power that they seem to have just gets to their head, and they feel they can do whatever they want to do. So when I'm walking in New York City in the summertime, I literally would see groups of them walking, patrolling the neighborhoods. You think, great. But it looks like to me, they look like a gang that's just patrolling the streets with guns, legally walking with guns, that can just do whatever they want to do. And every now and again, you do know, because we've all walked in groups before, there's always that one person in your group who just feels that they can just do whatever they want to do, or who entices everyone, or who talks everyone else into doing something they should not be doing. And I wouldn't be surprised to see them walking down the street sometimes. It's like, hey, got a guy over there. Yo, let's go check him out. And they go over and they're looking for some action. And before you know it, somebody's shot, somebody's beaten up. Which reminds me of another friend of mine when I lived in South Florida. Saw him one day on the basketball court. Saw him all bandaged up and everything. Yeah, what's up with you, man? And he's telling me, this is someone from back home in St. Thomas that was living in Florida. And I was like, what happened to you? He said, man, I was coming down I-4, Interstate 4, between Orlando and Daytona. And he said that encountered some police officers. He was speeding. encountered some police officers, and they just beat the hell out of him. What happened? He said they made him come out of his car. And when he came out, it was late at night. When he came out, I guess he was trying to make up time. There was hardly any cars on the road, so he was speeding. And he said when he came out, they made him go up against the car, backs to them. And he said it looks like one of them wanted to have some fun. And he took like his baton and like hit him between his legs, like spread your legs, spread your legs. And as he was doing it, I guess he brought it up closer to the guy's balls and hit him. And it was like, you like that, don't you? Like that, don't you? Knowing that he was going to get a reaction from my friend, like, yo, don't, you know. And the minute my friend did this or told him stop it or whatever, that was their excuse to just go in on him. And they beat him up, broke up his ribs and everything. That story happens quite often here in this country. Now again, this video has been like a half an hour already, and I know a lot of you have probably signed out already. Hopefully you made it all the way to the end. But I just want you to make this video because it happens. It happens in this country. It happens too often, too many times. People may say, yeah, that's just the one person here and there, but it happens too often. When it happens in such a grand fashion that reminds you that your life is not worth it to some people here in this country. There are people who literally are walking around looking for any reason to be trigger happy and kill a black man. It doesn't make me feel too comfortable. So when I said in another video that living in this country, yes, there's certain benefits, but living in this country, I don't feel whole. I don't feel complete. I don't feel safe sometimes. A lot of times I don't feel safe. I know what I'm talking about. And I'm sure I'm not the only black person who can say something like this. But I just figured I'll just go ahead and just create a video about it, just so you guys can hear. And that's just one incident that I just gave. There's some others, if I go through my mind, I'll probably think about some more. But this is a great worry. So we all are potential Ahmaud Arbery's. Anyway, you guys stay safe out there, okay? This was Caribbeanology. And thank you so much for sticking to the end to hear this video all the way through. You guys take care until the next video.